Welcome to APT VR Jam. I'm going to speak in English because we're recording this, so people afterwards can also understand. Some of you have already asked about the schedule, so I'm going to say a few words about that. Today we'll start with an introduction, going over like the schedule and other stuff. It says roughly at 1, but it will probably be sequential to the introduction. It's the first workshop, and in that first workshop we'll talk about items and mechanics, gameplay mechanics. So workshops kind of have this layout that first we'll have some small talk, maybe 30 minutes. The first one might be a bit longer, about the topic. And afterwards you probably get some ideas, maybe we'll have a discussion, and then you can integrate those ideas into your project. After the first workshop we'll have this break, and we'll have some lunch, and at 5 there will be the second workshop on the topic of graphical user interface. And tomorrow, kind of the same layout. So the third workshop starts at 12, 3 hours. Then this is on environment and level design. Then there's the break, and the fourth workshop is from 5, and there we'll have like a general discussion, like whatever you want to talk about, and you can present what you made during the jam, and everyone can play your game, give feedback, and so on. Right, any questions about this? Some of you were worried, like when are you then going to have time to develop things? So basically the instructors hopefully will be here during the scheduled times, but we won't like kick you out at 8. So as you know, the Lundara is also taking place here simultaneously, so the rooms are open and you can develop here as long as you want during those 2 days. Okay, so yes, we have one VR area, Vive area here, with 2 Vives in the same area, so try not to collide, and one is in the back room. So teams distribute yourselves where you want to be. And this area is larger than the one in the back, but there are 2 Vives in the same area. Yeah. So comments, questions? No. Then let's talk about the instructors. So we have Jens Stefan here. Where is your instructor sign? You need this.
Sure.
It's over there in the cupboard. Take it. So Jens is the unit instructor. He has worked on Apocalypse VR and is currently working on Rena game. VR Rena. Rena. Yeah. So he's professionally active in developing VR games on the HTC Vive platform. Yeah, so we have 3 teams and 3 instructors. Each team gets 1 instructor. This is actually already distributed, so he will be at your command. Then you have me. I'm also on Unity. I worked on Apocalypse VR, and I'm active in the CGVR, Computer Graphics and Virtual Reality Lab in the University of Tartu. So we currently just bought a new Oculus Rift and all sorts of other cool things. Also, Madis is from there, and he will be showing lots of cool toys in some time. And then we have Ats, who is also from CGVR Lab and has a company, Exterior Box, that does lots of cool VR stuff. Unreal Engine specialist. You have something to add about yourself? An overall cool guy. So yeah, the Unreal Engine team has him as an instructor. Okay, So what about the goal? So why are we here, and what are we going to do, and how not to, like, maybe this happens, I don't know. So the first goal is to learn from experienced VR developers about those three topics: items and mechanics, graphical user interface, environment, and level design. So those are basically like, we cover them in this quite high level but VR-oriented design perspective. So this is why we promoted that this isn't an actually kind of a technical talk or something. It's about how to design those things for VR. So it's more to like also for like game developers, artists, and so on. Not specifically for programmers. The second goal is for you to try to make something cool, hopefully, with the assistance from the instructors. So you run into trouble, they will help you, and have something made during those 2 days. And in the fourth workshop, show your results to others. And those are the three main goals for this jam. Okay? Oh, and the fourth one, of course, is have fun and get smarter. Almost forgot this. Very important. Okay. Any more questions about this? No? Then we can kind of go to start the first workshop. I'll give word to Madis after the topic, perhaps. Oh, yeah. In the beginning of each workshop, I want you to write your names and stuff also on this table. So, and not this, that will be each one for separate workshops, but you should also write this. Okay, so VR versus real life, which is which? I was wondering, like, what to actually talk about from the design principle. Madis recommended not to go into too much details. That this is the Vive, and these are the laser lighthouses, and how is tracking done, and so on. So it's more of a like broader topic. This is why we have a category like sight, so vision. How do people see things? So your regular computer screen usually covers about 30 degrees of the human's horizontal field of view or vision. So when you're sitting behind the computer at your regular distance, you see 30 degrees of your vision is what happens on the monitor. How much horizontal vision, how many degrees humans have? Does anyone know? Or have a guess?
210.
210, okay. You know this from...
Is it?
It's, I don't know, it's just a guess, or you have something?
I think I've heard something.
Something, okay. It's on the next slide, so I don't know if it's right or wrong yet. Okay. It's correct, but it's like the entire field of view. There's actually 114 degrees of binocular vision. So what is binocular vision? What's the difference?
It's the area of both your eyes covering.
Yes. So 210, like on the side there is this monocular vision that only one eye sees, but for like depth perception and all sorts of other things you need both eyes. So 114 degrees would be a good kind of number to show something spacey. How much of that does a VR headset cover? All of it, maybe more. Very immersive tech, or less. How much would you need?
I think most headsets around 110 degrees.
So, yes, Oculus Rift HTC5 around 110 degrees. So you are all very well prepared, I see. Done your homework. It says that Samsung Gear and Google cover 100 degrees. But you can see that it's kind of roughly covers this binocular vision, and this is enough to sign your names to all papers going around. Covers the binocular vision and is roughly enough to kind of give this immersive feel. Although, like when you first put it on, you still see kind of those dark edges around the vision cone. Okay, so this is for the info. This is good, but some of you might know humans actually see around very sharply about 2 degrees. So this is the foveal vision. It varies. You might say it's like 2 to 5 or something, but this is required to actually distinguish characters and see small detail in things. So I can see that there is this black blob that's probably a monitor here. I have to really like concentrate, see like this corner, focus on this corner. And so this is another number here, and humans like just move our eyes really fast, notice the details, and usually the brain kind of fills in that this is a monitor, you saw the corner and this other stuff, wires coming out of the monitor, it has to be that. Okay. And what this means is that just because like you can cover a lot of the field of view doesn't mean that a human will now get like 3 times more data or let's say useful information faster than from a regular monitor. So it still takes the same amount of time to like move your eyes, see, focus on the characters, read text and so on. Okay, human vision still works the same way. And another thing to keep in mind is that the relative pixel resolution. So this means that the screen inside the Vive is, although it's closer to your eyes and covers more of the field of view, the resolution, the relative resolution is quite low. So you can compare this to some 90s monitors. Don't know, I haven't calculated the exact numbers, but it's basically you looking at some old cathode ray tube monitor in the 90s. And this is important when you're designing stuff like graphical user interface or something that has text on it that humans need to read, something that has a lot of detail. Okay. And another thing, the user can actually turn their head and look to the other side of the environment. So it's not only that you need to have something in this front area in the range of 110 degrees, but I can turn right, I need to see there should be something here, you look up, there should be something above me and so on. Okay, and regarding to that, we can move on to space. Besides turning my head and looking anywhere I want in the environment, I can also move around. So I can step 1 meter this way and see the world from this perspective. The user has 6 degrees of freedom. And this can be considered the cornerstone of a VR experience. So the idea is that you're not like physically sitting usually down next to a computer and imagining yourself as a character in a game, but you can actually, like, the movement gives you the ability to experience the game in a more immediate way. Okay. And also, like, this can happen. Like, the user has a freedom to run, start running in your VR experience, and you have to be careful when you're designing your environment that the user doesn't get an inclination to just run into a wall. But where is the wall? So have you designed your game in this 2x2 meter space, 3x3, 4x4, or like square meters? This area actually that we have here, we have mapped the area as 1.5 times 2 meters. So it's smaller than those 4 square meters. And for example, a regular dartboard game setup has 2.37 meters, in distance from the user to the dartboard. Height isn't all that important, but judging from this, you actually can't, or it will be pretty difficult to implement a dartboard game in this small area where the person throws darts and then has to walk to the dartboard and pick the darts up again. Table tennis field is, okay, those numbers. Length, I think yes, length 2.74 meters and width 1.5. So you could like have the table of a table tennis in this area roughly. But you have to also keep in mind that the user can move around and you need actually more space than just a table. Okay. Actually, I was told that on this paper you can write like if you want to write your name, just write it. You don't have to be you can also write your name.
I did that.
Okay, cool.
On the other side.
Okay. Another thing in relation to space is that you don't want to move the player around in the virtual environment without the human actually moving in real life, unless it's teleporting or something relatively quick and doesn't cause motion sickness. Otherwise, like trying to move this guy without him moving in the VR, and it conflicts with stuff. And I always laugh at this when I did this presentation. I know it's, for some reason it's really funny. So we have like tried different designs when even like the player is moving up and down very slowly, it still gives a weird expression to the users. At one point at the start of the game, the user was 2 meters high on a platform, and after like 10 minutes he's now on the floor, and this doesn't like relate well. Okay, so don't move the user. Any questions about site or space? Comments? Yes. Discussion.
In VR, it is true that you have this bigger field of view, and it's very important to keep that in mind. So when you do these crazy roller coasters, then why it works so well is that the peripheral vision that you have been used to, that is very static, now is moving, and that is usually a problem in VR. So there are a couple of tricks to try and avoid that, and if you need assistance on that, then I bet people can help you, because Jens had the same problem with his game, which is also basically Spider-Man around some rooms. So at first it kind of felt like this, then we fixed it somehow.
People usually get used to it pretty quick. The sense of loss of balance still remains, but the feeling of like getting sick or something, that's not as that doesn't occur as often as I was afraid it would occur. And by the way, one thing, I'm experimenting with it currently, but what I'm testing is that I've seen that people who are hungry, who have not eaten at all, seem to get motion sickness way faster and way more intense than compared to those who have eaten well. It's from my experience, from a couple of people I brought to the lab to test. So I'm still experimenting with it. Like a couple of days ago, I invited a friend. I let him play the Spider-Man game, and he got sick, like really sick. And he arrived at 3 or 4 o'clock, and I asked him if he had sick. He said no. So now I'm experimenting. I'll invite him again the next week. Tell him to eat, and then I'll see if it like reduces motion sickness. So I might go onto something, but we'll have to see.
But the balance is still an issue, so this is still...
Yeah, it is. But But if people have problems with balance, it doesn't always equate to sickness, like feeling motion sickness.
And also about the space, like we did this example of having this ping pong table, then try to think in terms of where the player should be standing, not where the ping pong table should be standing. So if you're doing a ping pong game here, don't put the table in the center of the, like the 0-0-0 space, put it on the side so the person entering the game can be in the center of the play area, and then the board or the table is somewhere there. Actually, yesterday I tried to play ping pong in one online game, and it was really difficult to get the ball once it hit the net.
Because it's outside the player.
Yeah.
Another thing is if the player starts on a high ground, then the same rule should apply. That in Tragopolis, our player, if he goes into one of the playable levels, then the player starts on like 10-meter high tree trunk on a platform, and the problem is that when the players are not in the center of the play area or very far from it, then they're actually, and if they go into the level, they're not on the platform at all, and they're like floating down, like floating in the air. And if people are afraid of heights, then that can be a problem. Could be like,
running into a wall then.
Yeah.
There was this other this one. So basically, it's safe to assume that the player always starts in the middle of the play area.
It's safe to assume that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's opposite.
Okay.
That's the one other game that I did during the last Doodle there was this Baywatch game, and also we had this teleporting of different places on the beach, and the last place was on a narrow bridge, and when I tested it I was always playing in the center, yay, everything's fine, but then I gave it to some young children who were always running around, so when they got to the bridge they were not on the bridge, they were floating on water. That wasn't very funny. But then I just made the bridge super wide, so whenever it would stand in the last checkpoint, it would then teleport onto the bridge.
This is where actually level design comes in. That is a very good solution that is easy to implement and works for all cases. But another solution would be to actually hide the player in the center of the play area somehow. Maybe if you start a level, you have to like stand in and teleport you or something like that. So when you place the teleporter in the middle of the play area, and then you actually load the level. So that way the player will always start in the right place, and you can actually ground it inside like the game world's logic. But those are usually the best solutions.
I think Subpac is a really good solution. For example, they have this flat box that you need to grab, so you need to go to the center of the
Yeah, it makes you face a certain direction, which is very important for focus titles because 180 degrees. So you don't have to worry about that really.
Okay. So there should be something to kind of. It would be good to have something that guides the player in the middle of the play area before the actual game. So I was wondering, like, for example, in the startboard setup. If you just put the environment where the player is, or centered around the player, then the actual dartboard where you have to move to and pick the darts off could be inside a wall, and the player can't actually physically go and pick the darts up again. So in this bridge scenario, if the player has to walk across the bridge, then he can't because it's oriented towards a wall in real life.
You can also always say that your game is only playable on the 16 square meter space.
Yeah.
Everything less is too bad.
Then you're limiting your player base to.
Yeah, massively. I guess.
I think it was.
Steam statistics say that most people have like this maximum of 4 square meters. I guess.
So 50% at least have minimum area, something like this. Okay, cool. Okay, let's move on to items and mechanics then. We'll certainly come back to the environment and level design topics in the later workshop. But you're probably like thinking, so we have this VR environment, VR game, so what will the player actually do there? Will there be enemies? Does the player have a gun or a ping pong pallet? This thing that they hit the ball with, or darts, or what are the game mechanics? So in the Apocalypse we had these 4 items. Before that, virtual reality allows us to take virtual risks in order to gain virtual experience very similar to real life by Hans Mixon. This is a quote.
It's a modified version of the sentence.
It's a copy paste from an article.
Close enough.
Okay. It's a paraphrase of by Hans Mixon. Okay. So what's important is here is that it's very similar to real life experience, meaning that your items or mechanics, if you're designing something like a bow or a spear or a shield, so it makes sense that they kind of behave like in real life, but how many of you have actually tried any of those in real life? You have done something.
Or the bow on there.
You have shot the bow. Okay. What about someone throwing spears in high school, perhaps? A shield or a hand grenade in the army. Yeah. Okay. So the people have some experience, but me, for example, I don't think I have tried any of those. Maybe some like kids bow or something like this. So with that in mind, like for some people, actually this comes back to when we look at different weapons in detail, but I don't know, throwing a spear might not be that intuitive thing to do, like accurately. There are techniques, people practice throwing spears, shooting bows quite a while before they get good at it. So if you want your player to be good at your game, there are some things you probably need to consider. So let's look at them in more detail. The bow uses 2 hands, so 2 controllers. One to hold the bow, other to pull the string and shoot the arrow. It was very difficult to program. So, for example, you have to wonder, like, how is the bow oriented in your hand? Because will it snap between your 2 controllers? Is the orientation based on this hand's orientation or some other third way? So it isn't like one-on-one to real life, in the sense that if you are turning this hand and holding the string with the other, then the force is applied also on the other hand. Like if you're trying to turn it, the string also pulls this way along with the rest of the bow. But in VR you don't have a real bow there, so it's up to the user to either move the second hand as well or not. If he doesn't, what happens? And also, of course, different animations, all sorts of those things. Yes, cannot be emulated 100%, exactly because of like this discrepancy I just mentioned. Also, like if you're shooting a bow, then often people like pull the back of the arrow next to the cheek, right? But with Vive controllers, it's difficult to do because there is this huge circular shape, and it will hit your face or the headset before you can actually pull your fingers next to your cheek there. Because of that, it's difficult to aim accurately. You can't, you can also in some games do this trick that you pull the arrow through your head, and look, so the arrow is just like through your eye or both eyes or whatever, and you look where the arrow will fly. So that's also something people can do, but often aiming a bow is not accurately, it's not an easy thing to do. But it's potentially quite fun. So different bow games, I wouldn't say are popular, but I mean some are, but there's a whole lot of them. All of them aren't, but it's potentially quite a fun mechanic. What about the spear? So uses one hand or a controller, simpler. But another question, like in real life, I don't know, if you have a spear, it's usually like pointed, the pointy end upwards, right? It's next to some wall. You don't put it this way. It's this way. Then you pick it up. Okay, now I want to throw it. What will I do? I don't know, turn it in my hand somehow and then throw it, right? But with a Vive controller, you are not going to turn, or the player isn't going to turn the Vive controller the other way and then throw it. So how do you actually turn some spear in VR so that it doesn't turn in real life? Also, it's very difficult to aim, again, because, well, different reasons. Most important one, I think, is that in real life it's also difficult to aim. Let's say 20 meters, I want to hit some enemy 20 or 30 meters away with a spear. It's, if you haven't practiced for, I don't know, 5 years, it probably isn't going to happen. So some aim assist might be a good idea, so that I will throw the sphere and there is an enemy in that direction. The sphere kind of changes the velocity of the flight path, of its flight path, and hits the enemy. But well, it's not really in real life then. So depending on how you do it, if you want like the sphere to feel like it's a sphere and the player is really good at throwing it, then you probably have to do it really in a really subtle way. In the Apocalypse VR, we called it the magic sphere, and they're doing it in a non-subtle way. It changes very rapidly its trajectory, and it's noticeable that there's something going on with the sphere. Okay. A bomb or a grenade or something, one hand controller, quite easy to program. It's just an item, like you probably hold some button down to keep it in your hand. You let go of it, of the button, and the item drops. Nothing fancy there. Because of an area effect, so when this thing hits the ground, it explodes in some radius. It's quite easy to use. I mean, you do have to aim it a bit, but it's not like very accurate target aiming. You just throw it in the general direction. It hits the ground somewhere near the enemy, and the explosion area effect takes care of the rest. But one thing to note is that when you're throwing things in VR, or let's say you're throwing them in real life, you feel that, okay, this is this heavy, I have to apply that amount of force to throw it 10 meters or 5 meters or whatever you're aiming at. In VR, you are not actually feeling how heavy an item is. You can only feel the weight of the Vive controller, and it's fixed unless you attach some weights to it or something. So having a good like force function, or knowing like how much force do you apply to this thing when you throw it, you might need some tweaking so that it feels right. And finally, let's talk about the shield. So enemies are shooting at you. You have to block the bullets or whatever they're throwing at you somehow. Uses one hand. Again, quite easy to program. It's just a glider. You pick up, let the button go, it drops. But have you ever actually blocked some incoming projectile in real life with some big object, like a shield? Nope. So one thing to notice about shields, maybe like some people practice different like what was this European martial arts traditional, I don't know, fighting thing. So shield usually obstructs your vision. So in some shields there are like holes that you can look through and so on. But if you're like, if you want to cover, I don't know, your head against the projectile, then you're putting this big slab of material between the enemy and your eyes, and you actually don't see the enemy anymore, and you don't see the incoming projectile either. So in some games, transparent shields are a good idea. Something to consider when you're designing a shield. So, why do you think we implemented that many, four, isn't that many, but it's 4 different items in Apocalypse VR? Why couldn't we have just done a simple bow game? One bow, enemies, all that, and it's done.
Because then different people can find the suitable item for them.
So there actually, when we have playtested the game, there are people who really can't use the bow effectively at all. So they use the spear or bombs. There are other people who hate the spear, take the bow. It's different people, yes? Some people have one hand. Yeah, okay. So again, the player base is large.
Also, so that you could say that you have income.
4. All that.
And the axe is coming soon. And the
Axe is coming soon, yes. We have this, tried to implement also on throwable axe, but it had the same problem as the spear, that you can't throw an axe accurately at some specific target. So we have this sign, axe coming soon. I think it's still... It's coming. Okay.
Actually, we removed the sign.
Those are all good reasons, and certainly like the different play styles is one of them. But also, yes, all of them work differently, depending on different play styles, have different mechanics. True. Let's try this exercise. It's a very simple one. Everyone hold out your right hand in some way. I don't know. Just hold it. Reach it out. or this one. This way. I don't know. Hold the cactus above your head. Okay. Keep holding. Keep holding. It's going there. Then access reference might happen. Maybe you want to wave it. Okay. So it's actually tiring to do the same physical motion of like keeping your hand like reached out for a prolonged time. So some of you are still holding the hand, but you can feel the blood is flowing out of it. It's tiring. There's actually this. There was some reality show when people went on an island, and one of the tasks was to hold some weights this way. Like there are weights on your hand, and you have to like stand still with your hands reached out, and it uses like muscles that people often don't use. So. Like holding out one hand that holds a bow and shooting with the other hand for, I don't know, 20 minutes, maybe an hour, is quite tiring. And this is called player fatigue, and we think it's a serious issue in VR. If you only have one mechanic, then the players playing your game usually don't play it like for a prolonged time. They might take like short sessions often, but because like they get tired, the playtime is shortened. Okay. And different mechanics. For example, like one is you hold the bow, shoot the string. Other is you take a sphere, throw it, or hold a shield up, or throw bombs from down here. Those kind of help. So people can also, it isn't just different people preferring different styles. It can be one person changing the style through one PlayStation session they play the game. Okay. Any questions about those items or comments on player fatigue?
I have one general comment. I really like that this first presentation has the topics of mechanics and items and not locomotion. Because usually games more like heavily revolve around getting from point A to point B. So you really think about locomotion or how you get somewhere, where you have to go, and so on and so on. But in VR, it is often a lot more important to actually think about what do you do there, or what do you interact with, and how do you interact with those things. So instead of like trying to start to figure out your game from the locomotion perspective, it might actually make sense to think about things you can actually interact with and start from there. Because that is actually a lot more interesting in VR. It can be easier to solve in some cases, it might not be. But yeah, your game does not have to be about running a marathon or something like that.
It actually, it's a good comment. It actually kind of depends on what are you planning to do. Like my idea was that you all probably want to make a shooter game. Zombies are attacking you and you shoot them. So, but actually, in that sense, you even might not have to move from one place to other place, some teleportation or something. This is totally unnecessary. You are standing in this one place, and the enemies are coming at you from, I don't know, all areas. So locomotion isn't that of an issue there. On the other hand, you might want to have maybe not a game, but this experience of exploring some environment, and your main mechanic is moving from one place to other place to get different vistas of the environment. In that sense, locomotion would be more important than what do you do there. You look around, that's it.
Yeah, I mean like regular flat screen games, as VR developers usually refer to, like heavily revolve around developing your locomotion and seeing like how it works, like balancing it, and so on. Because like most games involve a lot of motion, and your like actual interactions are very simple. Because if you press a button, it's a button on your keyboard, or if you have to rotate the valve, then it's again press the same button, maybe do it multiple times. But in VR, you can do a lot more with a lot less. So you don't have to like do huge areas, but instead like focus on small things and how you interact with things.
It's more like you can do the same things with a lot more, in the sense that turning the valve isn't just pressing one key, but it might utilize both controllers. You have to do some patterns with them and so on. So it's the human-computer interaction is much more complicated.
Another note on item design is that I would avoid doing like this very precise aiming involving things, because let's say you have an awesome huge sniper in your hand in the game, but in real life has really light controller, so when you try to aim it, it really wiggles in your hand, so either you have to smooth it out in the game, or then just try not to do it, because on the regular screen you can just take everything off the controls and everything will be super still, but here you always move even a little bit, even though these are like sub millimeter in precision or something millimeter. So yeah, so but it's still, it's not exactly where your hand is, so it's very difficult. And also, I would suggest avoiding small targets, because while we're talking about Tribocalypse, the mechanics is that in order to start the game, you have to aim at some very distant sign, and as we were demoing the game a few weeks back, many children ran off crying because they couldn't start the game in like 3 or 4 minutes that they had in the demo. They were trying to aim at the fucking menu and they always missed. So maybe not the best idea.
About the precision thing, so that's what searching simulator is built upon. You can very easily make a fatal mistake, so that kind of makes the game fun. So you use it, so you have to avoid it.
Use the disadvantages as an element or a game mechanic in itself.
Yeah, the same thing applies for locomotion. Like usually you have to speak more about interaction than locomotion, but it can be the other way around.
I mean,
in the sense of accuracy, like in the searching simulator is a good example, because what the point is that if you fail, at least make it fun for your players. So even if they fail, they don't feel too bad about failing.
so if you miss the menu 3, then balloons
That's
appear.
This is a secret key to actually start the game.
So yeah, menu design is something we'll discuss in some future workshop. But this is a good point. That and also, yeah, I wanted to say that like having this big gun, I think you have even this maquette, 3D printed sniper rifle in Futuruum. It helps. When I played this game where there was the sniper rifle, I actually had to put a chair under my hand to steady it. So this is certainly something to consider. Okay. So designing items and mechanics. So I forgot to mention this entire series of talks. They're actually based on Jens's bachelor thesis loosely. And one thing that we developed there, that's actually helpful in designing anything in VR, not only items and mechanics, is this kind of metric or scale measurement thingy. It's not an accurate thing, but it should give some insight how to analyze whatever you're designing. One aspect to analyze your stuff that you're designing is immersion. So immersion kind of means that if it has bad immersion, then the thing feels like a clunky chore. It's annoying, it's buggy, and you really don't want to. You have no reason to use it, rather than the game tells you use this. But if it has a good immersion, then it's kind of this amazing thing that the person really wants to do and forgets what time is it, and uses it for a prolonged time. Or a buggy thing and a really awesome thing. So this is the scale of immersion, and next to this is clarity. This is a bit different in the sense that when the player understands what he or she has to do, in one end it doesn't even, and the other is that it doesn't have to even think about it. It all makes sense naturally. And from a pictorial perspective, it kind of looks like this. So you don't even, and it makes total sense. Okay. And if we put them those two together, then if you have a bad clarity and bad immersion, then you have an overall bad experience for the player. You can have good clarity and bad immersion, then it's a boring experience. player understands what to do, but there is no immersive aspect in the game that actually keeps the player there. On this corner there is confusing experience. The player is really immersed, wants to do it, wants to play this game. It seems awesome, but he doesn't actually know how to do those things. Yeah, so there have been examples. I don't know, do we have something from the items perspective? Have there been people who don't know how to shoot the bow?
Main problem is that people pick it up with the wrong hand. They pick it up with the right hand, though they are right-handed, and usually when you're right-handed, you want to pick up the bow with the left hand. Like when we were demoing the hands about, then this was the problem all the time. They pick it up with the wrong hand, and they don't realize it.
And then
when you tell them to switch it, then everything goes.
But they don't actually know that they can't switch it, so they don't switch it naturally.
It depends. Some try to wiggle the remote and expect the bow to drop, and then you just have to tell them that you can drop it with the same button to pick it up.
So this is
they pick it up with the wrong hand. That's one of the problems.
Okay, that's cool, because then the people are really confused. So I have this bow in my right hand, but now what I'm going to do? I don't how do I switch the hand and so on.
Maybe it wouldn't be said. It's a bad thing I didn't ask them if they should shoot the bow before, but they were all quite. Most of them were younger kids, so we might presume that they have not shot the bow before. So maybe they just they don't know how to use the bow, so they pick it up with the wrong hand. They think it's the right one because it's their primary hand.
To be fair, though, the exact same thing can happen in real life. So if they make a bow and try to shoot it, they will probably learn by doing it. At some time they think, oh, maybe if I try another way, maybe it's simpler. And they get better at it. So that's kind of,
Yeah, but then there's the question do you want to have your game as an really accurate, archery training, in the sense that there isn't a trainer, you have a bow, you have a target, try to figure it out, or you want to have something that guides the player to have fun in a couple of minutes instead of half an hour of figuring it out. So
a good example to try out, I'm not sure if I remember the title correctly, the horseshoes and grenades and stuff.
The gun simulator.
Yeah, the gun simulator is if you don't know how to operate the guns, because this game tries to simulate them as real as possible. You have to take down the safety switches in the correct places and so on. So it could take a new person 5 or 10 minutes to get one gun operating to actually shoot. So there are tutorials, but without the tutorials, it's if you have no experience, then it's really confusing. And that's it goes under the category you highlighted there. It's the player wants to use the gun, the player wants to shoot it, but it's so confusing. He has no experience, never done it before, and
This is also one of the best examples for the one click and actually doing the thing in real life thing. Because in first-person shooters, if you shoot, you just press button. If you want to reload, you press R, and that's it. But in real life, you actually have to reload the magazine and actually cock the gun, maybe, or whatever you have to do. So there's a lot more things to do inside it. It can be really confusing, and also if you think about actually things feel a lot more visceral in VR. So if you're actually in a combat scenario and you have to reload your gun and maybe something happens, maybe it jams or whatever, then it becomes a very huge issue, and the whole scenario plays out very differently than it would in regular games. So that's a whole new avenue of things that you can actually consider for your game as like a feature or like additional immersion factor if you would actually try to do those things.
Just because it's possible to do these things in VR, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to. Like you automate the process, and this will make the experience for the player much less confusing. You just have to ask yourself if that's what you want.
You can even go to the good old route of just pushing a button, but the problem here is that the player has a controller that they have never ever used before, and it has very weird buttons on it. So one famous game is Brookhaven Experiment, which has the reload on the side buttons here. Most people don't even realize there are buttons here, and then you teach them, and they're aha, and then instantly forget it. And once the first round of bullets is gone,
This is actually a really good example. So you can all probably intuitively guess that if you have good immersion and good clarity, it's a great experience. And you mentioned something about Brookhaven experiment, right? So in this game,
that's the last thing you see before you die out of not being able to reload it.
So it's this regular zombie shooter game. Let's look at the shooting mechanic, like Madis said. From the immersion side, enemies will swarm you, like you are standing in the middle of field and zombies come from all around. You have a natural instinct to shoot them because they're zombies. There's a nice sound effect, like when you shoot, the gun plays, or the game plays a shooting sound effect. And also the Vive controller feels like a pistol, so this is something I wanted to point out. Instead of trying to make a bow or a spear or some sniper rifle, I would just say that you have this trigger, you have this grip, and you shoot stuff. It feels like a pistol. I don't know. It seems quite immersive in that sense. But from the clarity side, from the plus sides are that like pressing the trigger will shoot like in real life. Besides the safety thing and that of course, it's probably like most people think shooting a gun would be like. So it doesn't have to be a realistic thing, but your regular Joe from outside thinks that shooting a gun, you press a trigger and it shoots easy. Point the gun at the enemy as well, like if the zombie is there, you have to point it towards the zombie. Seems clear, everybody knows that, but exactly like Madis mentioned, there is this grip button on the side that probably like emulates this small button that drops the clip out of the gun, but people don't know that, first they don't know that there is this small button that drops the clip and then you put a new clip on, and the second thing people don't know is that there's a button on the controller. So this kind of confuses players, although it makes a certain kind of sense, but people, it's not clear for them that this is how it operates.
There probably is a tutorial somewhere, but most people don't bother with that, jump right into the game, and
there is, like in the very first level, there is this. Initially, they didn't have it, I think, but they put that you run out of bullets, and there's this sign next to your hand that says press this button to reload, something like press the grip button to reload. Although then you still don't know that there is this button on the but you know that you probably have to find some new button that you didn't know about.
Then you hit the other button that switches it to
grenade.
Grenade at your feet.
Oh, also, like some of these problems are problems for new VR players and demos. So they might not be your actual gameplay target. So if you tell a person that actually owns a Vive, press the grip button, they probably know what it is, because they've done it in multiple games before, and so it makes sense to them. So these can be problems, and you might want to tutorialize them, and you might want to tutorialize them well, so that you don't have to think of those things under pressure. Maybe you want to, depends on what you want to do. But yeah, that if you're actually like on the headset, it's quite likely that you will figure out how to work, because the actual valves instruction for the Vive and the controllers is, I think, really well done. It's really good.
Yeah,
and
no,
if you haven't tried, check it out.
but there is still like the issue that is the grip button something that is logical for reloading. I like the, I think in Rec Room, like you have, there are a bit bigger cartoony guns, but you have to use the other hand to push something or pull something on the gun to reload. Was it something like this, right? And that kind of felt more, I don't know, the thing that you needed to pull, I think, flicker, and that was just pull this thing. Now your gun is empty, and it kind of felt more, I don't know if clear, but somehow better than using this big button on the side of the controller. Although it resembles the clip button on a rail pistol, but yeah. But that is true that Vive owners probably know what the grip button is. Yeah, this is exactly what I thought. So I don't know, the shooting in Brookhaven experiment might be somewhere there, like 3 pluses for immersion, 2 pluses for clarity, 1 minus. This is probably like a way you can use this clarity immersion spectrum to analyze different aspects in your game. Like, let's say you do 3 mechanics, try to put them somewhere on this plot. Like, where do you feel they belong here? And see if you can make it better. One that has like the lowest clarity, can you make it more clear? When you design an item or a mechanic, oh yeah, so this is probably this is a conclusion here. So try to think hard, how hard it is to implement it. Currently you have 2 days. Don't try to make something that takes you 2 months. Have something simple that might seem to work out, and then work on the design. You can think about how that mechanic is in real life, like we discussed, and do you want to make it as accurately as it is in real life, or do you want to have something different there? But then you still have to balance it, like from the clarity's perspective. Like usually things that are from real life, people will apply the real life knowledge to them. Unless they're kids who don't have the real life knowledge of that thing. But if you make something from, I don't know, a fantasy book, then people might not know how this should work. Can the players actually use that mechanic optimally? So if it's very accurate to real life, then do they need to be expert archers or spear throwers to actually find that mechanic useful for their play? Analyze on the immersion and clarity scale, like we did with the Brookhaven shooting thingy. And can you design it so that it will pay off the implementation? So will the players actually use it? You will spend, here probably a couple of hours, but in your future projects a week of I don't know, a month on implementing something, developing it. You should be like relatively sure that players will use this item, this mechanic. It adds to your game enough value that it's worth it. And how physically tiring that mechanic is. So there is this, what was this, VR fitness gaming, right? Fitness gaming genre. There are some bow games that actually have you shooting a bow and turning around and moving really fast in VR, and maybe this is the challenge you want to offer to the players. So then this player fatigue and such will be a plus in your game. But if you want to have like players who don't play it for their fitness and sports, and they want to just feel powerful, I don't know, then try to find out like how tired people get when playing your game, and maybe change the mechanics so that they use different muscles at different times in your game. And this is the end of part 1. Any questions, comments? If not, then maybe Madis is going to show some cool items he brought from Futuruum and discuss the possible arcade version thing. And after that, you're free to start developing. Oh, I should note that we'll have launch food at 3, and I think I actually have kind of an okay amount of food, so you all probably get to eat something, so don't worry.
Also in English, yeah? So hello. My name is Madis. I'm from Futuruum today, and if you watch the video of me introducing the game Jam, I spelled it wrong. So in revenge, I see Raimond has cut the edge, the corner of the logo. Never even. So anyway, I'm here for a short while today, but basically I just brought you a bunch of fun stuff that you might want to jam with. Starting with this awesome looking backpack that when you wear it you will instantly become much cooler.
But where's the lady?
The lady is not included, sorry.
Oh.
But basically it's this backpack that booms. So it's very simple. It basically works on the audio signal that you have in the game. So it doesn't need any extra plugins or implementation. And then you can have these weird feelings on your back. But maybe 2 things to think about when you might want to think about using this backpack. So in the Futuruum arcade, you usually use it with some shooter games, let's say the same Brookhaven Experiment, because it has some, as you said, nice sounds, a lot of bangs, and then it feels really cool. But maybe one thing that you might consider that I have been thinking about but I have not tried it myself is to use it for some other effects. Let's say you don't even have guns in your games, but you have like these other low sounds of maybe you're standing on in the middle of the street and the cars are running by you, and then each car has this loud rumble, and then once you goes by you actually feel the rumble. That's the effects part, or maybe something else that you can think of that is not actually even related to the player, but from the environment. And the other thing that I haven't tested is that I don't even know how low it goes, so maybe you can do it that the player doesn't hear the sounds, but the backpack will rumble, so then you can have some really ghostly experiences in some old houses. Maybe you feel that you're shivering, but you're not sure why, but you're shivering. Yeah, because how it works is that once you put the headset on, you have the audio output from the Vive, you then route this output through this tiny cable to the backpack, and from the backpack you can also get out the headphones sound. So it's this sits in the middle, and if you're not using it for developing a game, you can just listen music with this. It's also very nice. So it's very compact and usable. If you have questions, maybe it's good to ask about the backpack right now.
I do have actually.
Yeah.
Can you only use audio as input, or can you define the input yourself as well?
Well, it only has a audio channel in, yeah. So, what would you like to?
I don't know. I'm just asking.
So if you just want to rumble it without making sounds in the game, then you have to try these really low notes that, or just really crappy headphones that don't play low sounds. Then you can basically decouple the audio, and then you can basically code some.
You could designate the audio channel for it.
And have 2 audio outputs, yeah.
Let's say you have 5.1 output from your device, then you can just use one channel for.
Does the Vive have any?
Basically, it doesn't have to be on the Vive.
Yeah, you can route it straight from the computer then.
Yeah,
with some long cables.
Route the Subpac sound from the Vive cable and you use another audio device, maybe wireless.
True,
Yeah,
true.
that's it.
Something to think about, yeah. It also has a battery charger, but it should be full, so maybe it lasts 2 days. But if not, then the charger is in this corner here. And it will definitely make you sweat more than without the backpack, because it's tight, and it should be as tight as possible on your back. Then the spine really wobbles. And that's pretty much it with this. And if you would get some very specific games for this, it would be very lovely. And the other toy I brought is this Vive Tracker. I have one here. Which is basically this very similar to the controller without the buttons. So it's more nimble, it can be stuck onto anything, and it doesn't automatically scan the bike for you. You have to actually model the bike in the game, but in the game you can specify what part of the bike is this tracker object, and then you can basically have this bike in the game, so you can, I don't know, relive the scene from the movie Tulnukas, where the karvased are messing around with the bike and beating people. See, I have some possible applications for this thing. Is that you can basically do body tracking. I have 3 Vives, Vive Trackers, and not 3 Vives. And to get this kind of setup or this kind of result, you basically need to track both feet and also the middle part of your body. That's why I also have a very special, super special belt for you, so you don't have to run around without your pants. I have an extra belt for you, so you could basically attach it on your back, and with some helpful scripts, you will already have like a working motion capture very soon, like in the end of my talk. It works quite well. It does some guesswork, and currently the Final IK plugin that I might share to you temporarily, it's not the right one, so when you do this, your hands will go way weird. But in general, it works. The other thing you might use this is, like I said, to track objects, either bats, like the word you were looking before, I think, or anything else. I've tried myself with a table leg, and it's very useful. You can make virtually very much different objects, and in the real life, if you have like this part that is interactable, you have the same in the virtual world, and this upper half can be whatever it might be in your certain game. And it works quite well. It's always important when you're thinking about these real-life objects of where do you want this tracker to be in order for it to track well. I guess here they're being very brave, because when I did my table leg experiments, I put the tracker on the far end of the leg, because when you get close to the wall, the Vive has this chaperone system that tells you that you're close to the wall, but when you have it in this position, you can definitely go and smash some windows before you even realize. So
depends on which you value more, your wall or the tracker.
Yeah, or the true. That's one thing that's being used. And one more interesting use case is that you can actually take your phone and stick the tracker on top of the phone, and you can build your game such that one player in the background is playing against this guy in the game, and the other player can join the game with a really random phone. It doesn't have to have AR capabilities or dual cameras or even a gyroscope. Basically, it can be a tablet or whatever, because all the tracking comes from this thing. So once you snap it on, the game knows that this should be under camera, and you can get some very weird mixed reality experiences, which is also something that I will link to in the end, so you can already have like an almost working project to start with. Also, maybe about implementations. I guess I will leave the slides or something, so or you can click it, you can screen capture it. But basically, what you need, you should have like a huge stick that I can show stuff. Wait. So anyone who has seen Unreal before knows that this is Blueprint, and basically it means that every frame, set whatever it is that you want to make trackable, set its location, and the location that it should set is gotten from the tracker, which is like an extra node. But the tricky part is that it has this device ID, and now when you don't plug anything into this, it just asks you for a number, an integer, and it should be that ID number 0 is the headset, 1 and 2 are the base stations, 3 and 4 should be the controllers, and 5 and upwards should be like these things. But usually it doesn't go so smoothly, so it depends on which order do you turn things on, I think, so it becomes messy very quickly. So another hack is to have another node that gets you all sorts of different device IDs, and currently, at least in Unreal 4.16, if you put it to invalid, which basically says that it's an error, then actually it gives out the trackers. So you can do something fancy here, it gives you a list, but if you only have one, then the first one will be the one that you want. So whatever ID it is.
A note about this, if you're using the 4.17 view, you can actually use the motion controller component and just select different devices from there. And that way you also get the late update benefit, which basically means that
so don't watch this.
Controllers or their position is updated like at the very last second before sending the data to rendering, so their position or the latency of the position is a lot smaller than just using this get position and then do other API things and then start rendering.
Yeah, this method is a bit sleepy, so when you move your controller and this tracker, the tracker actually lags a bit behind. But
and also like there's documentation for all this stuff, so the same for Unity as well. So
yep.
Very helpful.
So going quickly through Unity is that you have to have the Steam VR plugin, you have to drag the prefab camera into the scene, you have to add some random new children to this camera rig, just add a cube or something and name it accordingly so it's easier to find. Then you go to the cube, and you attach this script called tracked object, which is in the Steam folder, and then you go back to the camera rig and then you add some trackers that you want in your elements. In default, this object is 0, so when you put some other number here, it gives you the ability to add these cubes, and then it should work. But I was thinking about some of the research that I can share with you. One is that the HTC Vive has actually released its own little project for Unity. That's the first one for this body tracking. So you can go and download that. It has a star, which means that it actually, in order to work, needs this Final IK plugin that I can temporarily share with you. When you want to use it after this jam, please go and buy the actual thing. And the bottom one is for Unreal. That's the mobile room scale, having your mobile phone in the VR game project. This has 2 stars because it has another a plugin that needs to work, which I have bought, so I can share it with you probably somehow as well if you want. But if not, also I have Futushoes, which basically just two random shoes, but one way if you want to do food tracking is that the current question is how do you attach these things to anything. So one way is to just attach it to these shoelaces, and in order for people to not have bare feet in this cold room, you can just use these shoes and kind of hack it onto here and then use it as your tracking shoes. So I found it very useful, and that is mostly it. I also have just brought two wire base station clamp thingies, because all these things have this universal mount on the bottom, so you can even kind of hack it somehow onto here and then I don't know, even have it spinning if you want. Some developers have attached this to the ceiling fan in their home and then like battle these flying robots and actually have them not coded to move, but just physically moving around. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so the tracker test to APT, like how you would attach it from the far end? Wouldn't end that you hold it, that you hold kind of wobble in your hand? How good is the tracking there?
It should be as good as the controller, basically. It's the same technology. That's one good point is that...
You said the sniper rifle really wobbles if you hold it.
Yeah, because you don't have a sniper rifle, you have this light toy, but when you have a real bat, then it actually has the real weight of the bat as well. So
aiming is actually difficult in real life, so if you want to aim really far away, your hand is actually too much.
So one thing is that you might want to attach it with tape, huge amounts of tape, then try not to cover these dents here, because that's the lighthouse tracking sensors. So the more you cover them, the less reliable the tracking is. And also it has this one button just for turning on and turning off. It's very cool design. It's right in the center. And when you hold it, then it goes into this pairing mode. And when you hold it more, then it turns off. And each tracker has a USB dongle. And if you want to have two trackers on one system, you have to have two dongles. If you want to have three trackers, you have to have three dongles, because otherwise you won't be able to connect your controllers. So keep that in mind as well. Anything else?
But in this setup, does it really matter, like from the tracking perspective?
If it's a rigid object, it doesn't really matter that much, because like the accuracy is pretty darn high. You probably look up the exact number somewhere, but like the angular accuracy is sub 1 degree, so you can calculate how much offset it gets you from like a 50 centimeters thick or stuff like that.
It should be if it's rigidly attached, then it should be. Doesn't matter where it is.
Yeah, for rigid objects it should be pretty good. Also note, if you want to use one of them, think about using objects that are not like shields, for example. But if you want to emulate shields, make sure that like the tracker can be viewed from all angles. So you don't actually, if you have like this huge plate, you don't stick it in the middle of the plate, because if it's rotated like towards the ground, then none of the trackers can actually see it.
That's what we tried. You put it here, and then kind of works when you're in the right direction, but when you, because you block the other side of the lighthouse completely, so it very often just went flying off somewhere. That's one thing to consider as well. Anything else?
Is USB good enough for the trackers?
I think so, yeah. Should be. Yeah, and yeah, the biggest surprise for me was as well that it needs every tracker needs its own dongle. So luckily in the lab we have like a bunch of extra USB holes, and everyone were like used up with this. So I don't know how the situation is here.
There it seems there are like 2 USB 3 ports on the front.
Other color blue. They must not be frequent.
Seems this way visually.
So, but otherwise, be brave and experiment with this stuff, and have a great jam. And also, I will be here for a bit more time, so ask any and all questions. And if not now, then Raimond can give you my number, probably. Or it's in the list somewhere. Registration form.
It's in Facebook.
I'm never on Facebook. And never on Skype. But yeah, but the point is that when you do something, even very simple, because there are literally basically, there's like a few games maybe that use these technologies. So we have it, but we have no games for it. So whatever you do, if it's at least somewhat usable, then we will definitely consider it for our little arcade game. And in the arcade we license all the stuff that we have there, so we actually can pay you something. So that's a motivation to use this stuff, or even if not using this stuff, when you make a great and simple and fun game that doesn't disorient people and make them fall down, then then we like it very much. So yeah, I guess that sums it up. Thanks.